What if I told you the most dangerous serial killer in American history didn't look like a monster? What if he looked like your neighbor, your coworker, the charming guy who held the door open for you at the grocery store and smiled just a little too long? What if he looked like someone you could fall in love with? Because that's exactly what made Ted Bundy so terrifying. Not the bodies, not the confessions, not even the gruesome details that still make investigators lose sleep decades later. What made Ted Bundy truly terrifying was the smile. Welcome, and if you've never heard the full story, not the Netflix version, not the headlines, then stay with me, because what you're about to hear is worse than anything Hollywood could script. Let's go back, all the way back to November 24th, 1946, Burlington, Vermont. A young woman named Eleanor Louise Cowell gives birth to a baby boy in a home for unwed mothers. She names him Theodore Robert Cowell. She is unmarried, she is ashamed, and so to protect the family from the scandal, something deeply strange happens. Ted is raised believing his grandparents are his parents. His mother becomes his sister. Think about that for a second. The foundation of his entire identity was a lie. Researchers and psychologists have debated for decades whether this deception planted something dark in Ted, whether growing up in a house built on secrets shaped the way he would eventually see the world, as something to manipulate, to deceive, to control. His grandfather, Samuel Cowell, was reportedly a violent man, a bully, someone who tortured animals and flew into rages. Ted's aunt later described waking up to find young Ted placing butcher knives around her sleeping body and standing there, smiling. He was 3 years old. But here's what the history books don't always capture about Ted Bundy's childhood. He wasn't obvious. He didn't scare the neighborhood. He was pleasant, polite, smart. He went to church. He did well in school. By the time he hit high school, he was the kind of kid that parents pointed to and said, "Now why can't you be more like him?" And that mask, he wore it beautifully. Fast forward to the early 1970s. Ted Bundy is now a young man in Seattle, Washington. He's attending the University of Washington. He's working on political campaigns. He volunteers at a crisis hotline. Yes, you heard that right, a crisis hotline, where he talks people back from the edge. His supervisor there, a woman named Ann Rule, becomes his close friend. She later writes the definitive book about him. She calls it The Stranger Beside Me. Because that's exactly what he was, a stranger hiding in simple sight. At the University of Washington, Ted meets a woman, tall, dark-haired, attractive, sophisticated. She is from a wealthy family. She is everything Ted wants and everything he feels he can never truly have. They date for years. She eventually breaks up with him. She doesn't believe in him, doesn't think he has what it takes. This rejection, some believe, becomes the blueprint. The women Ted Bundy will later target, many of them young, many of them with long, dark hair parted down the middle, fit a strikingly similar description. Draw your own conclusions. By 1974, something shifts. Something inside Ted Bundy breaks open. On January 4th, 1974, a young woman named Karen Sparks is attacked in her basement apartment in Seattle. She is beaten with a metal rod. She survives, but she will never be the same. On February 1st, 1974, Linda Ann Healy vanishes from her basement apartment, also in Seattle. She is a college student, a radio host, loved by everyone who knew her.
And then they keep disappearing. Donna Manson, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Parks, Brenda Ball, Georgianne Hawkins, one by one, Young women vanish from college campuses across Washington and Oregon. No bodies, no evidence, no clear suspect. Just gone. The police are baffled. Parents are terrified. College campuses go quiet after dark. Women walk in groups. They carry keys between their knuckles. And Ted Bundy keeps volunteering at the crisis hotline. Then comes the day that should have ended everything. July 14, 1974, Lake Sammamish State Park. It's a hot Sunday in Washington State, and thousands of people are out enjoying the summer. And in broad daylight, in a crowd of hundreds, Ted Bundy approaches multiple women. He introduces himself as Ted. He has his arm in a sling. He asks for help loading a sailboat onto his car. It seems innocent. He seems charming, helpless even. Janice Ott agrees to help him. She leaves with him. She never comes back. A few hours later, Denise Nosland also vanishes from the same park. Witnesses describe the man with the sling. They describe his car, and for the first time, law enforcement has something to work with. A name, Ted. A car, a tan-colored Volkswagen Beetle. And yet, nothing happens immediately, because this is 1974. There are no databases connecting jurisdictions, no DNA, no internet. Investigators in Washington don't know that investigators in Utah are looking for someone who fits the same description. Ted Bundy slips through the cracks. In the fall of 1974, Bundy relocates to Salt Lake City, Utah. He enrolls in the University of Utah Law School. He is, by all accounts, a promising student. And the disappearances begin again. Nancy Wilcox, Melissa Smith, the daughter of a local police chief, Laura Aim, Carol Duranch, who survives, barely, when Bundy poses as a police officer, lures her into his car, handcuffs her, and attempts to attack her with a crowbar. She fights him off and escapes, screaming into the night. Her story will later become crucial. And then Debbie Kent disappears from the same area on the same night. By 1975, detectives in multiple states are starting to connect the dots. A composite sketch goes out, tips flood in. Bundy's name comes up more than once. His own girlfriend, Elizabeth Klopfer, calls the tip line multiple times because something in her gut won't let her rest. But Bundy is calm. He is composed. He is studying law. He knows exactly how the system works. He knows what they can and cannot prove. On August 16, 1975, a Utah Highway Patrol officer pulls over a tan Volkswagen Beetle driving without its headlights near midnight. The driver is cooperative, polite. He explains that he was at a drive-in movie theater. But inside the car, the officer finds something unusual. Handcuffs, a ski mask, a crowbar, rope, trash bags, an ice pick. The driver is Ted Bundy. He is arrested. He talks his way out of most of it, but the handcuffs are the same brand used to restrain Carol Duranch. Carol Duranch identifies him in a lineup. Ted Bundy is charged with kidnapping. He is convicted. He is sentenced to 15 years in prison, and the world exhales just a little. But the world exhaled too soon. Because Ted Bundy has no intention of staying in prison. On June 7, 1977, while representing himself in a Colorado murder hearing, because of course he represents himself, Ted Bundy jumps from a second-story courthouse library window and runs. He is recaptured 8 days later, thinner, exhausted. 6 months later, on December 30, 1977, he escapes again. This time, he's been losing weight deliberately. He has spent weeks chiseling through the ceiling of his jail cell. He drops through into a guard's apartment. The guard is out for the evening, and he simply walks away.
For 15 days, no one knows where Ted Bundy is. He makes his way to Tallahassee, Florida. He rents a room. He uses a fake name. He blends in. To his neighbors, he seems perfectly normal. A little quiet, maybe. A little private, but normal. And then comes the night that will define Ted Bundy's legacy in the darkest possible way. January 15th, 1978. Tallahassee, Florida. The Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. It is after midnight. Most of the women are asleep. What happens in the next hour is almost too brutal to describe. Bundy enters through an unlocked back door. He attacks 4 women in their beds. Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy are murdered. Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner survive, but with devastating injuries. Kathy's jaw is broken in 3 places. Within 30 minutes, Bundy attacks another woman blocks away. She survives. The entire attack lasts less than an hour, and then he vanishes into the night, leaving behind a crime scene that horrifies even seasoned detectives. 3 weeks later, on February 9th, 1978, in Lake City, Florida, a 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach is abducted from her junior high school. She is the youngest of Bundy's confirmed victims. She is found 2 months later. This is the case that ultimately seals Bundy's fate. On February 15, 1978, a Pensacola police officer runs the plates on a stolen Volkswagen Beetle being driven erratically. The driver flees on foot. The officer catches him. He struggles. He fights. And then, when the officer asks him his name, he says it. Ted. It takes only hours to confirm who he really is. Ted Bundy is back in custody for the last time. Now here's where the story takes a turn that fascinates psychologists and true crime researchers to this day. Because after his capture, Ted Bundy doesn't break down. He doesn't collapse into guilt. He becomes a spectacle. His trial in 1979 is one of the first criminal trials ever broadcast on television. And America watches. Not in horror, or not only in horror, but with something closer to fascination. Women send him love letters, marriage proposals, gifts. They pack the courtroom gallery to get a glimpse of him. Think about what that says, not about Ted Bundy, but about us. In court, Bundy fires his lawyers. He represents himself. He cross-examines witnesses. He makes legal arguments. He is charming. He is sharp. He flirts with the female court reporter. He proposes marriage to his girlfriend on the stand. A legal technicality, by the way, that in Florida at the time, a verbal marriage proposal in open court constituted a legal marriage. He knew that. He used it. Even in a murder trial, Ted Bundy was performing. And through it all, he denied everything. The evidence, however, was overwhelming. A bite mark on Lisa Levy's body was matched to Ted Bundy's teeth. It was one of the first times bite mark evidence was used in a major criminal trial. The jury deliberates for just over 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Ted Bundy is sentenced to death.
He spends the next decade on Florida's death row. And this is the period where Bundy finally begins to crack. Not publicly, not dramatically, but slowly, through a series of interviews, through negotiations with investigators in multiple states who are trying to find remains of missing women. Ted Bundy begins to talk. He speaks with FBI profiler Bill Hagmaier, and in those conversations, something remarkable and deeply disturbing emerges. Bundy doesn't just admit to the murders, he explains them. He analyzes himself. He talks about what he calls the entity, the dark part of himself that he describes almost as a separate presence. He talks about pornography as a catalyst, a controversial claim that launched enormous public debate. He talks about the process of hunting, of watching, of choosing. He is clinical. He is almost academic. And for investigators who have spent years trying to understand him, it is both the most valuable and most deeply unsettling series of conversations they will ever have. By 1989, all of Bundy's appeals have been exhausted. His execution is set for January 24th. In the days leading up to it, something shifts in Bundy's behavior. He begins confessing. Not out of guilt, investigators are careful to note this, but as a bargaining chip. He offers details about victims in exchange for execution delays, location of remains, names he hadn't given before. He confesses to 30 confirmed murders across 7 states between 1974 and 1978. Most experts believe the true number is higher. Some estimates go as high as 100. The night before his execution, Bundy gives his final interview. He talks about his life. He talks about what he believes led him here. He is calm. He is articulate. He is, even now, trying to shape the narrative, trying to control how history will remember him. He fails. On January 24th, 1989, at 7:16 in the morning, Ted Bundy is executed in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. Outside the prison, a crowd has gathered. People are celebrating. There are signs that say, "Burn, Bundy, burn." There are people cheering. There is music. There are vendors selling t-shirts and buttons, which is its own kind of strange, isn't it? That the death of a man inspires a tailgate party. But maybe that's the thing about monsters. When you finally cage them, the relief is physical. So what do we do with the Ted Bundy story now, more than 30 years after his death? Because the conversation about Ted Bundy has never really ended. There have been documentaries, movies, a Netflix series, podcasts, books, podcasts about the books, YouTube channels dedicated entirely to analyzing his psychology, his childhood, the victims whose names we still sometimes forget to say. And that last part matters. Because here is the thing that gets lost in the fascination, in the composite sketches, in the courtroom drama, in the questions about what made him the way he was. There were real women.
Linda Ann Healy was 21. She loved skiing and hiking and had a job at a radio station where she gave weather reports for skiers. Donna Manson was 19. She played flute. She was on her way to a jazz concert the night she disappeared. Melissa Smith was 17. She was the daughter of a police chief in Midvale, Utah. She was found 9 days after she went missing. Kimberly Leach was 12 years old. She went back inside her school to get a jacket she'd forgotten. She never came home. These are the names that should echo. These are the stories that should keep us up at night, not the monster. The people the monster took. Ted Bundy was brilliant. That's not a compliment, it's a warning. Because the lesson of Ted Bundy isn't just about one man's evil, it's
It's about how evil hides, how it smiles, how it volunteers at crisis hotlines and studies law and holds the door open and says all the right things. It hides in charm. It hides in confidence. It hides in the assumption that monsters look like monsters. They don't. The FBI's Behavioral Science Unit, the same unit that inspired Mindhunter, built much of its understanding of serial killer psychology through interviews with Bundy and killers like him. The profiles they developed, the warning signs they cataloged, the understanding of how predators select and stalk victims. All of it was shaped, in part, by sitting across a table from Ted Bundy and asking the right questions. It is perhaps the most disturbing possible silver lining, that a man who caused so much devastation also, involuntarily, helped us understand how to prevent it. Bundy's case also changed law enforcement in ways that still shape investigations today. His crimes accelerated the development of nationwide criminal databases, what eventually became VCAP, the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. It pushed for better interjurisdictional communication between police departments. It drove the science of forensic odontology, bite mark analysis, further into the courtroom. And it made the public understand something that had always been true, but had never been so viscerally demonstrated. Evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it pulls up to the park. It wears a sling, it smiles, and it asks for help. There's a moment in Ann Rule's book, The Stranger Beside Me, that I keep coming back to. She writes about sitting with Bundy at the crisis hotline, late nights, long conversations. She describes him as kind, attentive, someone who genuinely seemed to care about the people calling in crisis. And she writes that she never, not once, felt afraid of him. She was working side by side with a serial killer, and she felt safe. That's not a failure on Ann Rule's part. She was a trained investigator, an experienced true crime writer, a deeply perceptive human being. And she didn't see it, because he didn't let her see it. That is Ted Bundy's true legacy. Not the body count, not the courtroom drama, not the death row confessions. His legacy is the reminder that the most dangerous people in the world are the ones you never suspect. The neighbor who waves every morning, the coworker who always remembers your birthday, the stranger who smiles just a little too long. Not every charming person is hiding something, but every monster we know of was charming to someone. Ted Bundy confessed to 30 murders. He is believed to have committed more, possibly many more, and the true number may never be known. Some of his victims were never identified. Some of their families waited years, decades, for answers that never fully came. Investigators in multiple states still carry open cases they believe may be connected to Bundy. The Pacific Northwest, Colorado, Utah, Florida, Vermont, places he passed through, places he lingered. The full map of his destruction may never be complete. And yet, here we are, still talking about him, still trying to understand him, still building series and podcasts and documentaries in his name. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's even necessary. Because if we stop asking why, if we stop trying to understand what produces a Ted Bundy, then we lose the chance to recognize the next one before it's too late. But as we do that work, let's say the names. Linda Ann Healy, Donna Manson, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Parks, Brenda Ball, George Ann Hawkins, Janice Ott, Denise Nosland, Nancy Wilcox, Melissa Smith, Laura Aime, Carol Duranch, who survived, Debbie Kent, Karen Campbell, Julie Cunningham, Denise Oliverson, Lynette Culver, Susan Curtis, Margaret Bowman, Lisa Levy, Karen Chandler, who survived, Kathy Kleiner, who survived, Cheryl Thomas, who survived, Kimberly Leach. Say their names, because they were not supporting characters in Ted Bundy's story. He was the monster in theirs. The monster next door didn't come with a warning label. He didn't come with glowing red eyes or a twisted face. He came with a smile, a sling, a tan Volkswagen Beetle parked in the sun on a July afternoon. And the world, for a long time, didn't see him coming. Now we know better, or we're supposed to. Let's make sure we do.